his life's at stake! This land's mine! Stop the chopper!
The Ranch Rebellion, a tale of fraud, courage, and justice. The helicopter's blades roared overhead, a lifeline dangling just out of reach. My hands shook as a man in a police uniform bellowed at the sky. Stop! Abort landing now. On the ground, an elderly veteran lay gasping for breath, his life slipping away. The officer's badge glinted oddly in the sunlight, plastic, not metal. His radio crackled with fake static, and his authority felt like a cheap costume. Next to him stood a woman claiming to be the president of a homeowners association I'd never heard of, her eyes cold and calculating. The helicopter circled, unable to land, while a man's life hung in the balance. This was my ranch, my home, and I was caught in a nightmare I couldn't explain. My name is Daniel Harper, a 52-year-old former paramedic who thought he'd found peace on a 50-acre ranch outside Willow Creek, Texas. 3 years ago, after losing my wife to cancer, I traded the chaos of city ambulances for the quiet of rural life. My 2 kids, 17-year-old Emily and 13-year-old Noah, came with me, leaving behind the sirens and memories of a life we'd lost. Our new home was a haven of cattle lowing and roosters crowing, far from the urban sprawl. But peace, it turns out, was an illusion. Our ranch sat on the edge of a new suburban development, where city folks chased a taste of country living while still craving their overpriced lattes. I figured we'd keep to ourselves, grow vegetables, raise cattle, and live simply. I was wrong. The trouble started on a crisp Tuesday morning while I was tossing grain to the cows. A woman in a sharp business suit strode across my pasture like she owned it, her heels sinking into the dirt. She carried a clipboard and a smirk that promised trouble. "Mr. Harper," she announced without preamble, "I'm Margaret Ellison, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Your property violates neighborhood regulations." I stared, dumbfounded, as if she'd just accused my cows of tax evasion. I'd lived here 3 years without a whisper of an HOA, especially one claiming authority over my rural land. Margaret rattled off a list of absurd violations. My cows were causing noise pollution with their moos, my chicken coop was a health hazard, my vegetable garden was attracting wildlife, and my fence was too tall for standards I'd never agreed to. The accusations were so ridiculous I almost laughed, but her official-looking documents from something called the Central Property Authority stopped me cold. Before I could respond, a car rolled up my dirt driveway, a Crown Victoria painted like a police cruiser. Out stepped a man in a crisp uniform, his stride exuding authority. "Officer Nathan Caldwell," he declared, "here to investigate complaints about noise violations and unauthorized agricultural activities." At a glance, he looked legit, badge, radio, the works. But my paramedic instincts, honed from years of spotting lies under pressure, screamed that something was off. His badge caught the light wrong, like cheap plastic. His radio lacked an antenna, and the static it emitted sounded like a kid's toy. His nameplate was crooked, and most telling, his uniform pants were too short, revealing socks with cartoon cowboys. No cop wears cartoon socks on duty. "Which department are you with, Officer Caldwell?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Nathan fumbled, muttering about regional law enforcement cooperation, without specifics. When he demanded to see ranch permits that don't exist in rural Texas, I knew I was dealing with a fraud. Margaret stood by, nodding as if she'd scripted his every word. It was clear they were a team, but their goal remained a mystery. Were they scammers? Extortionists? I couldn't yet see the full picture, but I knew one thing. They weren't who they claimed to be. The absurdity escalated. Nathan misquoted police codes, calling it 10 to 5 when he meant 10 to 4, like he'd learned his lines from bad TV shows. His badge fell off during a heated exchange, bouncing across the dirt like a bottle cap. He even tried to cite my rooster for disturbing the peace at dawn, as if roosters crowing were a felony. When the bird, offended by the accusation, pecked at his pants, Nathan stumbled, scattering plastic buttons across my pasture. Neighbors started filming, turning the scene into a viral comedy show. I decided to dig deeper. I snapped a photo of Nathan's license plate and called a friend with access to vehicle records. The car was registered to Nathan Caldwell, a private citizen, not a police department. This officer was no more law enforcement than I was a rocket scientist. But the stakes were about to get much higher. The next morning, Margaret returned with a bombshell, a fine notice for $1,500, payable within 10 days to avoid prosecution by the Central Property Authority. The document looked convincing: professional letterhead, legal jargon, case numbers, but my paramedic training taught me to spot bureaucratic nonsense. The authority's website was a glossy sham, filled with stock photos and fake regulations. Payment instructions led to a personal bank account, not a government treasury. "Margaret," I said, holding up the paper, "this is as real as a monopoly deed." She smirked and warned of escalated enforcement if I didn't comply. Nathan's harassment intensified. He showed up daily, snapping photos of my violations, and once even stopped Emily and Noah on their way to the school bus, demanding ID checks for minors in an agricultural zone. My kids came home terrified, asking if they'd be arrested for feeding the chickens. Fury boiled in me. These weren't just scammers, they were tormenting my family. I warned Nathan that if he approached my kids again, he'd regret it. Margaret, however, was too clever to let things escalate into an obvious crime. She kept the pressure psychological, just shy of legal thresholds. Her next move was a propaganda campaign. Margaret went door to door with fake environmental reports claiming my cattle polluted groundwater, fabricated studies saying my ranch tanked property values, and forged complaints from concerned citizens. Many neighbors bought her lies, swayed by slick documents and her confident delivery. It was chilling how easily people trusted her authority without questioning it. I spent hours calling City Hall, the county, and even the EPA, only to learn there was no HOA or Central Property Authority registered anywhere. Frustratingly, officials called it a civil dispute, leaving me to fend for myself. Then came Ellen Carter, my neighbor and a retired police detective with 30 years of experience. She took one look at Nathan's bumbling performance and knew he was a fake. "Real cops don't wear cartoon socks or arrest roosters," she said with a grin. Ellen launched her investigation, using old law enforcement contacts and databases. She tailed Nathan to a gas station, where he changed out of his costume in a bathroom and counted cash payments. His uniform? Ordered from an online costume shop. His badge? A $5 eBay purchase. Margaret's documents? Printed on software that anyone could buy. Ellen's findings confirmed my suspicions, but the real shock came when she overheard Margaret on a phone call. From across the street, using binoculars, we watched Margaret's living room transformed into a fraud factory. Computers churned out fake documents, rubber stamps forged official seals, and stacks of letterhead mimicked government agencies. On the phone, Margaret said, "The ranch owner's scared, but he's asking questions. Nathan's keeping the pressure on. If we push harder, he'll sell within weeks. Once we have his land, the development project moves forward and we cash in." The truth hit like a freight train. My 50 acres sat in the middle of a planned $50 million shopping mall. Without my land, their deal was dead. Margaret's fake HOA was a scheme to force me out through harassment and intimidation. Ellen uncovered Nathan's past, a former mall security guard fired for impersonating a cop. Margaret had hired him for $200 a day to play her enforcer, exploiting his history of fraud. She'd researched my paramedic background, using safety concerns to manipulate me. Her operation was sophisticated yet amateur, relying on people's fear of authority to avoid scrutiny. But she'd underestimated Ellen and me. The situation exploded when Margaret targeted George Thompson, a 78-year-old Korean War veteran living next door. George, with a history of heart trouble, trusted authority implicitly. Margaret fed him lies about my ranch, contaminated water, dangerous wildlife, code violations. She showed him fake documents, convincing him my operation threatened the community. George, a proud man who valued rules, believed her completely. On a Tuesday, Margaret and Nathan staged a safety inspection of my ranch, with George in tow. Nathan, wearing a plastic hard hat, scribbled fake violations. Cow manure exceeding federal limits. My coop, violating non-existent codes. My garden overmitted. As a paramedic, I noticed George's distress bale skin, heavy breathing, Han and D clutching his chest. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked. Margaret seized the moment, shouting, "Your illegal ranch is making this man sick." She turned George's suffering into proof of my crimes. George's stress peaked as Nathan threatened to quarantine my cattle with forged orders. Believing he was witnessing justice against a dangerous neighbor, George clutched his chest and collapsed, gasping. I dropped to his side, checking his pulse weak and erratic. I called 911, requesting a helicopter. The nearest heart hospital was 45 minutes by car, but 15 minutes by air. Every second counted. As I cleared a landing zone, Margaret and Nathan did the unthinkable. Instead of helping, Margaret screamed at the approaching helicopter. "This is private property under HOA regulations. You need our permission to land." Nathan, panicking but loyal to her cash, grabbed his toy radio and shouted, "Aircraft, abort landing. This is a police investigation." He stood in the landing zone, arms spread, waving his plastic badge. The pilot, Captain Reynolds, radioed dispatch, confused by the conflicting orders. Precious minutes ticked by as George faded. Ellen sprinted across the pasture, phone in hand. "Daniel, he's not a cop," she yelled, playing a recording of Margaret instructing Nathan to keep pretending until he sells. Neighbors, now gathered, heard every word. "You hired a fake cop to steal his ranch," one shouted. Nathan broke, sobbing. "I'm sorry, I needed the money. It was just acting." His badge fell off, his radio went silent, and his uniform unraveled. Margaret, desperate, pulled a gun from her Persia prop, but convincing enough to freeze everyone. "Stay back. This is a legitimate transaction," she screamed. Neighbors flooded 911 with reports of an armed woman blocking a medical evacuation. Real sirens wailed as police, SWAT, and federal agents descended. Captain Reynolds, prioritizing George's life, landed despite Margaret's threats. Medics rushed to George, stabilizing him as the helicopter whisked him away. The SWAT team, led by Lieutenant Brooks, recognized Nathan from his rap sheet as a serial police impersonator. Margaret, still ranting about property rights, was cuffed as she waved her fake gun. Nathan tried to flee but was tackled. Both were dragged away, their scam exposed. Ellen's evidence recordings, photos, forged documents sealed their fate. FBI agent Laura Bennett revealed Margaret's Central Property Authority was part of a multi-state land fraud ring, targeting rural owners with fake HOAs. My ranch was one of many. Her schemes had stolen millions. Margaret faced 15 to 20 years for fraud, extortion, and blocking emergency services. Nathan got 5 to 7 for impersonation and conspiracy. Civil lawsuits from victims ensured they'd never recover financially. 3 days later, George's daughter called. He'd survived, thanks to the helicopter and my quick response. He apologized for believing Margaret, becoming a regular at our ranch, sharing war stories with Emily and Noah. Neighbors, ashamed of trusting Margaret, brought food and helped with chores. We held a barbecue to celebrate George's recovery, where he toasted to Daniel, who showed us real heroes fight fake authority, and to a community that stands together. Captain Reynolds visited, praising my calm under pressure. As my kids played in the pasture, I realized my ranch was more than land. It was a testament to standing up to fraud. Margaret and Nathan were gone, George was alive, and our community was stronger. What would you have done against such injustice? Have you faced bullies hiding behind fake authority? Share your thoughts below, especially on how we confront violence and unfairness in our lives. Your voice matters. Let's hear your stand.